So here's the curious case of the Slack message.
Yes. Okay, so this is, I think, the story that all of you have been waiting for. It's the thumbnail for the live stream. I think this is like the fun story of the day.
Oh, man.
Me and Carrie have some good stories, 5 and 6, and I am excited to talk about this. So everyone has heard now about this whole Bernie, Warren, Politico thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through an article talking about it. And then at the end of the article, I'm going to explain as far as I've been able to put together a timeline of what I think actually happened. Cool? Let's go. Okay. So Bernie Sanders has denied sending campaign volunteers to trash his 2020 Democratic primary rival Elizabeth Warren. First of all, interesting first sentence. A lot of not context. Let's keep going. Saying the feud was a bit of a media blow-up. And going on, he goes on to say that, you know, there are hundreds or thousands reality. Bernie Sanders has a 1,000,000-man army of people volunteering for him, also people staffed. And sometimes 1% of 1% of those people say something that they shouldn't. And this is one of those cases. So Sanders has now, and I like the word they use, Sanders attempt, not anything, just an attempt, because it's genuinely a bad thing that he did, and I'll get into why that I'm being sarcastic about that in a second. To calm tensions between the two campaigns comes after Politico. We're going to get back to Politico and how they're really at fault for all of this in the first place. We'll get to that in the end. Obtained a purported script. I love how they use the word purported as if they really don't even know if it was real, which, again, we'll get to at the end. Sent a script to his volunteers, which is not an accurate statement, with talking points for organizers looking to sway voters away from Warren. A key criticism of Warren in the script, seen by Politico, keep a pin on that, touched on her ability to reach beyond the party base. Now, I want to remember this is all done by a guy named Alec Thompson. I'm sure he has a Twitter. I'm sure after I'm done reading this, he would love to talk to you. But let's keep going. Warren said, I was disappointed to hear that Bernie's is sending his volunteers out to trash me. Continues. Now, this is where Warren gets a little in the gray zone, let's call it. We all saw the impact of factionalism in 2016, and we can't have a repeat of that. Now, I took that as almost a comparison to Trump to a big degree, because she's she's either going after like a Bernie bro argument.
That's what I heard.
Yeah.
That's what I heard in that argument. I didn't actually hear anything about Trump. I was thinking about the 2016 primary elections that she was. Oh, no, I could be wrong.
But no, I agree. Like, I would say it starts with the Bernie bro, but the insinuation of it is that the Bernie bros caused Hillary to not win. So it gave us Trump. So I think I would even say it's both. Okay. But it's still a very, very disgusting thing for Warren to say, in my opinion. Anyway, we'll get into a second why I have such a high opinion on that. So Warren also urged Sanders to reconsider and turn his campaign in a different direction. In part of this response, Bernie goes that this is just a bit of a media blow up, and then quotes, and I think this is a very Bernie thing to say because it's a very Bernie thing to say. You have heard me give many speeches. Have I ever said a negative word about Warren? We have here yelled at Bernie Sanders for like, hey, Warren's doing this thing. Why don't you say anything? He's like, nope, I'm not going to talk about Warren. So the Newsweek has contacted Sanders' campaign, and this is interesting. The way that they word it sounds like they're holding the article hostage. I'm going to read it like we're in mafia land. Has contacted the Sanders campaign for further comment and will update the article should they receive a response, implying that they won't otherwise. So what goes on? What was actually the highlight of this? That people who support Warren are highly educated and more affluent and are going to show up to vote for the Democratic Party no matter what. That's literally something that we've said about Warren's base since like a year ago. So I guess part of the reason people took this so seriously is that it kind of landed. And it's like describing someone's demographic of their voting base. I don't know. Anyway, so addressing, and this is interesting. Now, this entire thing that we've heard, the entire media circus of this has been specifically about this part with Biden. However, further in the article, and this goes to the point that I'll make a little bit later, Biden's brought up in this that no one's excited about him. He doesn't really have any volunteer support. He has no youth support. They talk about Buttigieg and say he's a cute guy, but he can't beat Trump. That's not brought up at all because everyone's like, yeah, they're already fighting each other. It's almost as if the target that's being painted is on two allies to try and get them to split apart. And we already have a lot of contention between Warren base and Bernie base. So I feel like this is okay. So let me just get to the main point of this. So this is the timeline as I've been able to piece it together. And you tell me who's to blame after this. So you have a random staffer in the Bernie campaign. Again, million-man army, thousands and thousands of paid staff, people all around the country, writes a memo. This random person writes a memo in a internal Slack chat. Now, this Slack chat, as far as I've heard and I'm aware of it, had a stipulation that you're not allowed to say mean things about any other candidates. You're just supposed to be productive and talk about how to make Bernie win, how to talk about Bernie policies, not to bash anyone else. So he writes this memo that gets put in there. They delete it, as far as I can tell, within a few hours of it being up there because they go, this is against our terms and service. This is against what we're about. We're not about trashing other people. Stop, random staffer. What happens next? Politico publishes an article saying that Bernie Sanders has been telling all of his volunteers personally to start going after Warren. Now, that seems like a bit of a jump. It seems like what has actually happened is some random staffer wrote a random document that the campaign said, this doesn't look like something we support, and deleted it. And Politico anyway, what's his name again? Alex Thompson decided, doesn't matter, we're going to make Bernie, we're going to make this random article that has nothing to do with anyone, Bernie Sanders' new campaign and outreach plan. So then what happens? That's how they pack it out. They say Bernie Sanders does this. The article goes out. Elizabeth Warren reads it. Elizabeth Warren doesn't go, this doesn't sound like the Sanders I know, the guy who has never attacked me publicly, as far as I can tell, on just about any issue at all, who doesn't take the gloves off and have just started to pull the fingers of those gloves off against Biden, but really has never gone after Warren. You know what makes sense? That he's actively telling people that I'm a trashy person. That makes a lot of sense. So what does Warren do? Warren decides that she is going to call out Bernie publicly and send out fundraising emails saying that Bernie Sanders is trashing me. I need your money. Bernie Sanders, of course, at some point realizes this is happening and goes, yeah, I didn't do that. So who are we to believe? Are we to believe that Bernard Sanders, a man who doesn't attack anyone except recently Biden to a degree and recently Buttigieg, is going to do a pretty strong attack for his type of campaign against Warren when she's polling at what, 13, 14%? And then also attack everyone else when his campaign in 2016 wasn't about that? His current campaign isn't about that. And he has top-down decided that the way to do it, the way that we start this attack, is by saying Warren and getting Warren people to vote for Sanders by telling them they're rich and affluent. Brilliant. Get them a can of SpaghettiOs. Or is the possibility of this that this Alex Thompson of Politico saw a thing someone sent to him, went, ooh, let the smears begin. Because remember, we talked about this about a week ago. Sanders is doing well in the polls. He's leading in Iowa, leading in New Hampshire. They're gonna smear him. Welcome to the smears, guys.
Yeah. I mean, this is like politics 101 right here, right? So first of all, just to be clear, I have volunteered for canvassing door-to-door and phone banking for nearly a dozen different campaigns in my lifetime. So I know what it's like to be a person that is like on the campaign, going door to door, talking to people on the phone. And I got to be honest, I know this is probably no surprise to anybody, but I go off script a lot. Okay. So, you know, the scripts are there as a suggestion. largely. You know, like a suggestion and also a support for the people who are there to volunteer, to give people words so that people have confidence to speak on the phone to other people. So that's what the script is for. And there are no rules that say that anybody who is campaigning for a candidate has to stick to these parameters, right? So that's first and foremost, like there isn't a lot of control necessarily that Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, or any of these candidates, especially on this scale of campaign, has over the people that are campaigning. Now, having said that, yeah, Bernie is the head of that campaign. And, you know, it sounds to me, I'm not sure how long it took them to take that script down, but it does sound like to me that the campaign office or whomever was running that took responsibility in taking it down. And I think that it would behoove Bernie a little bit to say, you know, hey, like, I run this thing, I'm the head of it, and I will make sure that instead of saying, you know what, it's a lot of campaigner, it's a lot of other people. You know, so I think there's a little more strength in saying like damn right, I'll make sure that this doesn't happen again, you know, instead of like pushing it off as like other people's fault. Because I think we get a little too much of that in leadership as it is today. But that'd probably be my one criticism of how Bernie came out around any of this. Because I do think that this is a smear job. I think this is Politics 101. I feel like they're spotlighting something that is a little ridiculous to spotlight, like based on all of the other political campaigns I've ever watched in my lifetime and the level of smearing that occurs. Now, I do get that supposedly Bernie and Warren had this pact where they weren't going to be smearing each other at all. And so that might be why this is more highlighted. Maybe it's because, they're seen as the two leading progressive candidates. Maybe that's why this is such a big deal. But really, this is, again, it's like kind of a non-story that's being embellished so that we like the mainstream media can point at Bernie and say, look, this guy is a total, fill in the blank, misogynist to blowhard, who knows, and everything in between. So, I think this is a non-story that's gotten embellished into a really, really big story. And as far as Warren's reaction to it, like that she utilized it for, raising campaign funds, again, like, that's kind of politics 101. I could be mad at her about it, and there are other things that I'm a little more upset with her about. And I was a big Warren supporter, a big one. And this is a non-issue. This is not what I would be upset with Warren over. It's like we get into like as a society into like the weeds on these silly soap operatic stories, right? Instead of really just digging deep into the policies that they're pushing and the votes that they've made. Like there are actual things to go after, with all of the candidates. And this is the stuff that catches our attention. So I guess it's a little bit, we're to blame a little bit for it too, I guess, in some ways.
Yeah, I just think, it's not, like, how is it that we're getting so up in arms? How dare they look at polling and call out the distinctions between candidates and look, our candidate is favorable amongst these demographics according to this polls. Don't do anything negative. Don't say anything bad about another candidate. It's like, that's a pretty high standard the Bernie campaign is holding themselves to. And the fact that they're holding themselves to it, anything that does not meet that bar, someone like this Politico article is going to be like, you compared yourself to a different candidate, and Mr. I don't want to be negative, and I'm going to take anything any of your supporters say and put it on you. So you mentioned Alex Thompson and his Twitter account. I want to go ahead and give the same PSA that he is giving. He says, to Bernie supporters upset with our reporting, Alex Thomas, DC, and I are different people. Please direct all hatred to me instead. So if you do want to tweet at Alex Thompson, please do not mean tweet this person. This is a Politico reporter. We don't particularly agree with his assessment in this article, but I propose if you would like to tweet at Alex Thompson, let's demonstrate that Bernie supporters are policy driven. So if you'd like to tweet at Alex Thompson, whose Twitter is at ALXTHOMP. That's ALXTHOMP. Tell him what policy position of Bernie Sanders you like the best.
And here's what I'm going to add on to this, because I think Kira made in a sense, like almost the opposite side of the argument that I was at, but I think exactly the same argument at the same time, that this is a non-story. And that's kind of why I'm upset about this, because one thing, like if I had just read the articles and I came in, I would have been like, okay. But what I kept seeing, especially on my Facebook feed, is a lot of Warren and Bernie people thrashing each other over this story. So it's like, again, should Bernie have maybe come out a little more forceful because he's holding this high standard and he hasn't met it? Perhaps. I would argue this is supposed to be an internal, no one sees it from the outside thing. Maybe they should have expected, hey, people might be spying in or not. To Warren's campaign, are they taking advantage of a situation that is handed to them? Yeah,
of course they are.
I agree that they definitely are. And would I be upset if Sanders had a similar thing, if the tables were flipped? Perhaps not. But I really look at this as this article never needed to be written. It never needed to be published. It is taking both sides out of context. It is taking advantage of already existing fissures that they know exist on both sides. It's gossip that they're turning in. But again, like one thing I always say on the show is perception drives reality. And they're creating a perception that something that to us looking at the situation is just, hey, some guy that shouldn't have written a thing wrote a thing. And that's the story. That's the whole story.
And those mistakes happen on campaigns all the time. Yeah. That's why I'm saying this is like kind of a non-story. Like these things happen. And it's been embellished into a huge story. And